This is Specular. One LED, infinite possibilities like you've never seen before. We created Specular with enough light to match 4 regular LED panels. We also made it with professional level CRI, accurate daylight temperature, and extremely strong build. Specular, the only light you need.
Okay, welcome everybody to a sweet presentation with Alex DeMarco. I'm super excited to have him on. Alex, thank you for coming aboard. I'm really happy that we were able to track you down. I know we had a lot of difficulties because you're so busy, but good news is that we got you on, so I'm ready to rock. How's it going, man?
Oh, it's great, man. Thank you for having me on, Aviv. This is an awesome opportunity to talk with you and a very large, awesome filmmaking community. So thank you for being patient and having me on, man. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, brother. I know they appreciate it so much. I mean, the Cine Summits have been growing year by leaps and bounds because of people like yourself. Why don't you give us a quick kind of overview? I don't know, people don't really, are now just going to be introduced to you. I know you've done amazing work. You've done some stuff for Disney, for Sony, MTV, Wiz Khalifa music videos, a couple features. So you're out and about, you're doing your thing, and you're just getting, every day growing and growing. So give us a little bit of history about yourself, like, the cliff notes of it, and then everybody wants to dive in, obviously, to all the great material you have ready for us.
Yeah, sure. So I started doing film as a young kid and went to college for it. While I was in school in Pittsburgh, I made my first feature-length film. It was created enough noise in that community to get me out to Los Angeles, where I continued to direct music videos. It's something I've been doing since 2010. And once I came out to Los Angeles, I was hired on to direct a $800,000 feature. And then from there, I created my own music video production company. And we have done music videos for Wiz Khalifa, Juicy J, Big Sean, Tory Lanez. Recently, I completed a music video that helped launch an artist named Khalid. The music video I did was to the song called Location. And then today, we're writing pilots and shopping our scripts around to Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, just to name a few, and still receiving and working on multiple bigger music videos. So I have a big music video dropping tomorrow. It's a big pop video, so I'm excited for people to see that. And yeah, that's where we are.
Holy smokes, that was even a bigger array of things than I even expected. But okay, so now we're really anxious to dive in because your work is incredible. So to have the opportunity to learn from you is going to be quite a treat for us. Why don't you give us kind of, tell us what we're going to do today, and then we can just dive right into it.
Cool. So I was going to focus on practical preparation. I feel like communication is one of the strongest assets on set and creating whatever it is you're creating, whether it be a film or a commercial or a music video. So I'd like to focus on creating a treatment and why and what parts of those treatments you really want to put your emphasis on, your focus, and also creating overheads. Also another pre-production, pre-visualization material that you can use to better communicate with your team, your talent, and so forth.
Okay, that sounds spectacular. I think a lot of the people that are listening and watching right now are maybe a little bit newer to the idea of making a treatment and making it an in-depth, a piece of the whole puzzle. So that's going to be fabulous. And this idea of overheads, I think that's going to be new to a lot of people. So this is going to be absolutely fantastic. Before we dive in, do you want to give us kind of like an understanding of what a treatment is and why it's important, or is that already kind of built into what you're going to tell us right now?
Sure. So the overall kind of gist of sending a treatment or creating a treatment or what a treatment is for is just it's a way for you to communicate to a client or an artist or executive producers your vision for something, but on paper, simply put. So for those who aren't as creatively inclined as some of the filmmakers watching this video right now, this is your way to kind of put it on paper and communicate effectively your vision to your clients, EP, artists, etc.
Nice. And this is generally in order to land the job, correct?
This is to land the job. This is also to better communicate your vision for a job you may have received, but the person hiring you on maybe wants more clarity as to what you're going to do and how you're going to approach it. And so therefore it's not always practical just to have a voice conversation about what you plan to do, since, as we all know, there are so many moving pieces when it comes to video production, film production.
Okay, let's rock and roll.
Alrighty. All right, so the first part of a treatment that I'd like to focus on is called the lookbook. It's the most visual part of your treatment. Say I wanted to do a music video for Wiz Khalifa, and Wiz Khalifa was talking to me about potentially doing a video that represents or resembles Scarface, or a gangster movie taking place in the 80s. That's all of the notes he's given me. I'm then going to make a lookbook, which is pulling imagery from Pinterest, Google Images, any other photo banks that you can find, and putting them together in a nice collage or a nice format to give kind of that visual aesthetic, its best cohesive feel, and then show it to Wiz or my client to let them know, okay, this is what we had talked about, or this is what I'm feeling visually. Here's some direct pictures and ideas on what you can expect. A lot of times with the lookbook, I try to do my best to make it resemble how the final product is going to look and feel, but also you can use it to communicate kind of more abstract aesthetics, like an artist or a client for a commercial may ask for lots of blue tones and wants the commercial to feel cool. So I might go and find a bunch of really neat photos that have different gradients of blues and cool colors and kind of put them around in this collage. And although I'm not going to be shooting gradients per se, it kind of gives them the idea of what I'm going for and creating a feel. So the lookbook is your way of communicating, effectively communicating your visual idea for a project to your client by using the use of imagery.
And is it normally one kind of more developed thought that you have, as opposed to here's several different thoughts?
Yes, it can go that way. I will use a lookbook sometimes just for the overall look of a video, but there are instances where, there's multiple sequences or scenes in the project you're doing, and I will need to go and create a lookbook for one scene where it could be like a love scene. So I'm going to grab imagery, high quality imagery. That's important to remember, of some love scenes that resemble what I'm going for aesthetically. I'm going to put them all together for this scene. The next scene may be a breakup scene, so I'm going to go find some imagery of maybe a couple breaking up in some like cooler colors, less warm, less friendly, and then I'll make that its own separate page, its own separate collage. So it's kind of like two sets of lookbooks. Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay, great. Good to know.
So the next point I wanted to hit is aesthetic. This probably should have been the first point, but this is the importance of describing an overall feel. So when someone comes to me, like I had mentioned in that Wiz example with doing a 1980s gangster piece, that's the aesthetic, that's the overall feel, and that's kind of like what you can tell your client. What you plan to accomplish in as few words as possible, giving a general encompassing feel for what you plan to do visually. I like to make a whole paragraph about this aesthetic in my treatment. A lot of times I'll put that after the lookbook. I like to start with the lookbook because humans are very visual animals, and we like to see imagery first before we start reading words. So I'll hook my client with the lookbook, and as they move down the pages, it'll come into the overall aesthetic. And in the overall aesthetic, I talk about what this project means to me on an emotional, artistic level, because that's very important to communicate that passionate edge I feel. And I'll go into detail about, I feel this way about the 1980s gangster scene. I feel like it could closely resemble blank, blank, and blank, maybe some movie references. what I'm doing here is just I'm trying to help whoever's paying for this or who's going to be overseeing this. I'm trying to give them as much information and communicate as much information on what the final product will look and feel like, what I plan to do with it. So aesthetic is incredibly important, because that gives your client a chance to get inside of your head and hear your own words on what your approach will be like when executing the project.
Yeah, and this is interesting because this is now diverting away from the visual and now getting to the words, the wording of it, as well as I'm hearing two things from you now, that you want to describe it in words, and number two, to really get into it as in depth as possible. That's the two things that I heard that are very important there.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
The next thing I like to do after your lookbook, your aesthetic, talking your aesthetic, is talk technical approach. Now, not only are people who are outside the film world, or your clients, or your EPs, or whatever, they're going to be visual animals, yes. So you give them the lookbook. They're hooked with the imagery. Then you're moving on to the aesthetic, more of like the ethereal things you plan to do and references and what it means to you. Now you need to get into technical approach. And this, to me, is one of the most important parts of a treatment, because 9 times out of 10, your client's really not going to have an idea of what cameras you're going to use, what lenses you're going to use, why you're using those things. I think it's incredibly important to talk technical approach. A lot of times in my technical sections of my treatments, I'll talk about using 4K HD. For us filmmakers, 4K is a second language. For people outside of that community, 4K probably means $4,000. So
Yeah,
it's good to, talk and not talk down on anyone, but it's good to help people understand in as few words as possible. This is what we plan to do. Ultra 4K resolution is almost 4 times higher than 1080 resolution. And things like what cameras I choose to use, like a red camera. Why am I using a red camera? Why are we using these certain lenses? Are we sticking with longer lenses or wider lenses? What does that say about the project? How does that cater to the project? How does that help emphasize the end look and feel? And also within that technical approach, I don't even just mention camera. I also mention editing technique, rhythm. Is it going to be fast paced? Is it going to be slower paced? Are there going to be tons of cuts? Are there going to be hardly any cuts? Will this be a one take? If it's a one take, why and how does that help the end look and feel? And what else in technical approach? Some lighting. You can talk briefly about lighting. It's going to be high key, low key. You don't really need to get into like color temperatures of lighting or anything that's too specific. I like to think that if it's conversation you're having with your gaffer, it's probably not the language you need to put on the treatment.
right.
But when you're talking to your client over dinner about what cameras and stuff you want to use, that's kind of the language you want to include in the technical approach.
Great. Now, in order to kind of understand it a little bit more in depth, what's the potential disaster that could happen if you skip this step or kind of lightly glaze over it and don't give it the full attention that it requires? And I'd be interested on that exact same question also on the talk aesthetic that you have here as well. Well,
yes, of course. That's an excellent question. So if you want to skip out on talking about your technical approach, you do run the risk of being on set and maybe things not going as well as planned, or you're a little bit behind time. Remember, you know how to get out of those jams because you're a filmmaker. But people who may not know that, clients, people paying for your commercial music video or anything, they're going to look at what's in front of them. They're going to be thinking, oh, we're behind time. Is it the camera? I was told by a buddy that we could have used this camera, or is it because of the lighting? They're kind of left in the dark. So now you're letting them live in the dark and come up with their own conclusions as to why things on set may not be technically running as smoothly as they could. But that's the nature of filmmaking. So in a way, explaining your technical approach helps your client be in the know from the outset of what you technically plan to do, how you technically plan to execute the video. let me talk about aesthetic.
Sure.
Aesthetic even more important. Aesthetics even more important. I feel like if you miss out on the aesthetic, again, you're leaving your client in the dark to come up with their own conclusions. You're not by leaving out aesthetic and technical approach in your treatment. You're kind of taking away from explaining 100% of your vision. So you may only explain 50% of your vision if you decide not to put in a bit about the aesthetic. You may take out 25% of your vision if you forget to include the part of the technical approach, because nobody knows what you're thinking on those things, and therefore they'll be forced to kind of come up with their own conclusion. Here's an example. I include a lookbook for Wiz and that whole 1980s concept. It's got pictures of Al Pacino. It's got shots of pastel cars and everything that falls within that Scarface kind of feel.
Yeah.
But I don't put an aesthetic on there. I don't write anything about what the track means to me, what this overall 1980s feel will do for the project or anything. If I include things in the lookbook and I don't put the bit about the aesthetic in the treatment, then people can look at the imagery and come up with their own way how those puzzle pieces fit together. I think it's just, again, it's important. Including a part about the aesthetic is just communicating to your clients that you have an attachment to this project. You're explaining your attachment, your personal attachment, and your personal approach. If you exclude those things, people might not be too sure what your personal approach is or whether or not you even have one. They may think it's all a visual medium. They just want to stand behind the monitor and see that your shots match up with the lookbook, and everybody's working at that. So when you try to come and put in your ideas regarding aesthetic on set, they may not be as open to them because you didn't write that in to begin with. So I think it's just effectively communicating your overall vision. So it's important to include lookbook, aesthetic, technical approach.
Love it.
Okay. So one example for an aesthetic and technical approach in a treatment is for this music video here, which is for an artist named Love. He just released the music video I Like Me Better, which was on the top 40 global pop song hits on Spotify. So the video's out, and we're going to show some clips for you guys here. So here is the aesthetic approach. In the treatment, I have it labeled overall approach. And I wrote, when I hear I Like Me Better, I'm immediately brought to a place of everlasting love and all of the beautiful, beautiful visual energy that comes along with it. So right out of the gate, the first line right after the lookbook is just communicating to the clients, the artists, and everyone associated with making this project happen is my personal attachment to the video, what it means to me. I think, again, that is absolutely crucial to communicate on a personal level first. And that helps everyone get excited, because a lot of times your clients are going to be, oh, I agree, or oh, I see the same thing, or better yet, I'm happy that the director, the filmmaker, the producer sees and feels the same thing.
Nice.
The following video breakdown encapsulate this overall theme by strategically intercutting between two different versions of the same couple, a present-day couple and an older couple. We get a chance to see their world and feel their love in a cinematically captured day in the life in New York City. So already out of the gate, I'm kind of like painting a picture for people, like where are we going, what is happening. Very simple, one paragraph. Next paragraph is, where this video succeeds is in our ability to capture real, heartfelt emotions and actions from our couples. With honest, professional performances, we can really drive home the tenderness that this song evokes. So again, we're just speaking to the emotion of the video. What do we want from our audiences? And I'm communicating that first. Again, we're touching base on a personal level with your clients, which again is super crucial. The couple's apartment will rely on artistic production design, set decor to visually represent the story of our couple. I'd like to use the blue rose motif in these production design moments and throughout the run of the video. Okay, so this was kind of like a side note the client and the artist and I had discussed, which is their album art cover is a blue, it's a white rose painted blue. And so I had added that bit at the end of the overall approach. I did that because I wanted to show the client that I had paid attention to their desires for the video in our initial phone call with them. So that's kind of like, here's my ideas, here's my personal attachment, here's your personal attachment. I would love to mix that into the overall approach. And this way, moving on to the technical approach, we all kind of feel like we're stepping into the next part of the treatment together versus just my voice is, oh, I'm the director, I feel this way, we should do it X, Y, Z. It's, I'm the director, you're also the creators, we're coming together to bring both of our visions to the table. Let's get to the technical approach and get to the practicalities of making all of this happen.
Love it. Great stuff.
So the technical approach, I'd like to shoot this video on the 4K Ultra HD Red Epic or Sony A7S II. So right out of the gate, first sentence is about the cameras and the resolution in which we'll shoot them in. You know, most of us, when we say we're going to shoot something in 4K, we just know what we're talking about. We're talking about 4K, high definition. I wrote purposely, I'd like to shoot this video on the 4K Ultra HD Red Epic or Sony A7S II. Ultra HD is just more adjectives and communicating that this is highest resolution. Doesn't get any higher than this in today's day and age. Again, essential in communicating small details.
Yeah.
I feel that the Sony DSLR is okay. So this part here, this is kind of a unique technical approach to read to you, but I personally am not super big on using the Red Epic for music videos and some other projects, especially when we're doing a lot of run and gun and switching locations, which on this video, and as you can see from the clips, we have a variety of different locations, so we had to be nimble and moving a lot. And I'm making a case in my technical approach for using the A7S, which is a DSLR. Red Epic is a much bigger camera. And I'm trying to convince them that we should stick with a smaller camera. Because a lot of times your clients usually have a heads up, you'd be surprised, but they usually know about the Red. It's a popular name, and clients will say, you know, I want my video shot on the Red, without knowing that there are also technical limitations. So this is me attempting to help sway the client in a way that's going to actually benefit them.
Sure.
I feel that the Sony DSLR is a great call for the montage moments because it's compact and easy to shoot, run, and gun moments with. For this particular video relying on capturing the right moments, the A7S will be much more efficient. We will use a small range of film tools such, okay, so that's that. The A7S will be much more efficient. I kind of left it there. We did end up shooting on a variety of cameras on this set, but ultimately, after I sent this treatment, they were totally okay with us using smaller cameras. So I guess we should talk about the next bullet point.
Yeah, and that's that. But the one little key that I got out of that is that, you know, at least now they won't be freaked out when you bust out a small camera. They're like, wait, we're paying all this money. Why am I getting this little camera that fits into a pocket? You know what I mean?
Exactly, and that's a good point. That's such a good point. I remember, like, what I was talking about with the lookbooks. Humans are very visual animals. So if you're spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on a music video and your team shows up with a camera that's the size of your wallet, it's going to raise questions. So be very forthright in your treatment before you even get on set, and bring everybody into the know. Again, is crucial. It keeps you in a professional light, and it earns you respect, and you're able to do what you want to do on set because you've communicated, and your client's always going to respect that versus not communicating and pulling out a camera the size of a wallet and freaking everybody out.
Right. Sweet.
So in the treatment, we have lookbook, we have talking aesthetic overall approach. We have talking technical approach. Now I'd like to talk about talking about toys. Talking about toys is a very unique chance for filmmakers to help add more value to their projects, jibs, dollies, drones, what have you, steady cams, things of that nature. I always include this in your treatments. A lot of you may be familiar with a lot of Kendrick Lamar's videos. The director for Kendrick Lamar's videos, he's very keen on adding information about different toys and technical toys and robotic arms that haven't even been brought into the filmmaking world. He pitches those in his treatments and gives them to the clients, because a lot of times clients want to stand out and they're willing to pay for these extra toys that other filmmakers aren't utilizing to give them the unique visual advantage. So there's multiple perks to talking about what I say talking about toys. But going back to the treatment for the I Like Me Better video, so I added toys to the technical approach section of my treatment here. Following the bit about pitching shooting on the A7S, a much smaller run and gun style camera, I continued with, we will use a small range of film tools such as a car mount, steady rigs, 4K aerial drones, and a jib to ensure a great look. That's all I put in there.
Nice.
This helps when you're going back and forth again on budget. So there's any concerns about, where certain things are going in the budget. As we all know, these things cost money to rent and to get operators for. But it also shows your client that you're in the know of what film tools and toys to utilize to give them the unique visual advantage with their end product. And so always mention your tools. I think it's highly important. And yeah, that's pretty much that.
Yeah, I like the logic behind it, that you're saying that it kind of lets them know that you got them covered. You're up to date with what tools are necessary.
Yeah, I would agree. Color palettes. So the last bit I put in my creating a treatment is your color palettes. So remember, we started with the lookbook. We talked overall aesthetic and approach. We talked technical approach. We talked toys, and now we're going to wrap it up with color palettes. Color palettes are just a nice, very visual way to just tie everything together under a color scheme, overall look and feel. I usually include, and as you can see in this I Like Me Better music video treatment, I had taken 3 stills from 3 different movies and included the color palettes for each of those scenes underneath them. But they all 3 of them kind of fall within one overall color palette, which we used in this video. And as you can see, it's somewhat similar to what we had mentioned in the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
It just further gives a professional touch to your treatment as well, and helps the client really understand the look and feel. They can almost, going through all of this in a treatment with a client gives them, a much better view into the end product and what you plan to do and how you plan to get there.
Isn't it also, Alex, just as much kind of like, I won't say just as much, but it's also for yourself in the sense that you're fine tuning your commitment to a certain approach, so that you're not all over the map, and then you get back to the editing and it's like, oh man, this is one thing, this is another, nothing's working here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's definitely a good reference, and you don't just send the treatment to clients. Like, you want to send it to your production coordinator and your AD and pretty much everyone on your team. Everyone on your team should be seeing this treatment. I feel strongly, because again, you're explaining what you're doing with your overall video, and people involved in the overall video, they want to know what's going on. So this is instead of standing there talking to each individual person until you're blue in the face, you can easily send them this document that shows exactly what you plan to do, how you plan to do it, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what's the rhythm, what toys you're going to be using, what they can expect as far as cameras and resolutions, and ultimately how serious you are and how professional you are, because you went and did all of this pre-production material to ensure that the set runs smoothly, and that understanding the vision is something that everyone understands and not just the one or two people who are running the set. It just brings everyone together, and ultimately that's going to get you a better product in the end every time, because you're communicating from the outset. You're not choosing to just start communicating on set. You're really bringing people on from the very beginning and just laying out a clear vision and a clear way of doing it.
Yeah, from everything you just said, it basically, it sounded like you just described, like almost a captain of a ship, like a leader. You really have to embrace that leadership role in order to keep this this boat going in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah,
it's not going to run itself.
Absolutely not.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. So that is creating a treatment. And again, for music videos, commercials, there are other elements of a treatment that may be more specific to that type of project than others. For example, in the same treatment, I have a breakdown of the song and what's happening in certain moments of the song. So as you look at this treatment, it has a start time. It says start to 29 seconds. We open up with a gorgeous aerial sweeping wide shots of New York City. Then we move into our apartment through the window, and you can clearly see we've executed that in the final video. And then I have more sections breaking down from there, 29 seconds to 49 seconds, 50 seconds to 1 minute, 10 seconds, all the way to the very end of the video. It's all really broken down, and you can look at this treatment and also watch the video, and everything essentially lines up. There's a couple little lines in here of things we plan to do that different things on set didn't allow us the time or the luxury to get them done, so we had to kind of rework them a little bit. But it would be a good experience to check out this treatment and then also watch the video and see those main differences, see if you can catch them.
Amazing. And I'm very curious though, Alex, for this particular piece, did you win the job based on the treatment or vice versa? First you got the job and then you created the treatment once you knew you had the job?
So this one was very unique. I actually got the job ahead of time, but they still wanted me to pitch a treatment for it.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of both.
Yeah. Right.
But I could always send you ones that I didn't have the job for, which is the majority of them, and send in treatments.
Right.
Also, I've sent in, I don't know, there's got to be like a good 40 treatments I've sent in, spent a lot of time on, and did not end up getting at the end of the day.
Right.
But what I did end up getting is the person's respect as far as my professionalism went, because they had seen how much time and detail and focus I put into these treatments. And although that may have not been the vision for that product, they have come to me again and again and asked for treatments for other products and projects. So doing a good treatment, regardless if you get that exact job, is a win-win, because if you don't, you're communicating to that potential client that you're professional and you're serious and you're willing to put in that legwork even on spec. So I think that speaks volumes to you as a professional filmmaker.
Yeah, and that's an incredible attitude, because I can imagine people getting very jaded and saying, forget this, I'm not making any more free treatments, and then maybe getting it and maybe not. You know what I mean? So that's. But I understood from some other directors that I spoke to that that's the name of the game at that level, is you're submitting your ideas and you hope to get picked. So you don't, and you obviously don't land them all. That's just you got to accept it.
Exactly.
Very good.
Okay, so the next section that I wanted to focus on, that I don't really, this is something more personal to me and my approach in directing and communicating a vision to a team, is creating overheads. I know a lot of people like to storyboard. I'm personally not the biggest fan of storyboarding for my own reasons. But creating an overhead is a great tool and tactic to use um, when communicating with, again, your team and your talent. This is more so to communicate with them, not so much to be communicating with your client. You're not really showing your client how you're going to go about doing the video and executing the video and what the overall look and feel is going to be like you did in the treatment. Doing the overheads are really more of a practical form of communicating with your team. This is something you do in pre-production as well. On your screen, you can see some of the overheads that I did for this I Like Me Better video. Please mind the fourth grade style sketches as I was kind of doing them on a flight to New York City.
That's about my level of sketching, regardless. So.
But there's four main points I wanted to hit with creating the overheads. The first bullet point is your lighting plan. It's incredibly helpful to communicate with your gaffer and your DP where your lights are going. Are you putting them out windows? Are you wherever you're putting them? It's not just show up on set, talk to the DP, figure it out for the first time while you're there. It's you've been to the location, you understand the measurements and the size of the location, and you're already kind of mapping in where your lights are going to go. So, for example, on this I Like Me Better shoot in New York City, we had actually gotten held up at a park location while our gaffer and the rest of our crew were supposed to be at our next location setting up the lighting. So by the time we got out of the park location, we could walk into this next dive bar location, and the lighting would already be set up. Had I not created a overhead, they would have all pretty much been waiting for me or guessing, which could even be worse because if it was way off what I had in my mind's eye, we would have had to strike all of the things that they guessed and restage everything. So that saved us major. We only had an hour in this location because I had created an overhead with a lighting plan built into it. The gaffer and the team knew exactly where to put the lights and everything. So as soon as we showed up, we just set the camera up and started shooting right away. That helped us major. I could not recommend doing overheads enough. Super easy. Do it on a dry erase. Bust out each one for each location. Talk over the dry erase with your DP and the rest of your team, almost as if you're like overlooking plays before a game or something like that. It's such a visual way of drawing arrows and things. You're eliminating confusion, and with eliminating confusion, you're eliminating stress. It's a win-win.
You know, I find this one really fascinating because it almost assumes that you have a really in-depth knowledge of cinematography. And if I understood it correctly, maybe I'm not quite understanding it, and all you're really telling the DP is, here's the kind of look that I'm looking for. You tell me how we're doing. Here's the space. Here's the look I want. How are we going to get this look? It sounded to me like you're kind of giving them a lot more information than that. I want the lighting to come from here and to come from there. That requires you to have a pretty good cinematography knowledge. So I'm trying to understand that if that's what's going on here.
Yes, correct. I do have a good cinematography knowledge. I would suggest or advise those filmmakers that may not be so cinematography inclined to do the lighting plan overhead with their DP. Mm-hmm. Best case scenario would be go to the location that you're going to be shooting at, go with your DP, bring your gaffer if you can, but if your DP is your gaffer, just obviously bring that person and set up your overhead and start talking shots and do the overhead with them, put in the lighting plan ahead of time, and then obviously take a photo afterwards, create a nice little look or a nice little PDF that you can send to the rest of the crew. So when you guys get there the day of shooting, everyone has a nice breakdown. So right. Yeah.
So if you're, like you said, if you don't kind of know on your own where you know you're going to want the lights to be, then just get on set, or at least have some imagery of the set so that they can already start to prepare that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Got it.
So the next point is camera blocking, communicating camera direction to your team, creating more organization with block shooting. Essentially, a same scenario. You can meet with your DP and do that with them. But if you know what you want and you feel like you can handle it yourself, I like to draw in little camera icons and put in arrows, dotted arrows to show if the camera's moving, where it's going, how it's getting there, what path it needs to follow to get there. This helps in a big way because if you have, say, you have an hour to do or a couple hours to shoot out a room, and you need to look one way and then you need to look the other way. Well, instead of clearing out the room every time you turn the camera around, you know from your overhead which way the camera is facing in all of your shots. So as an AD's job would be, they could come in and say, okay, let's do all of the shots that are facing this way first. Right. Then when that's done, we'll do all of the shots facing the other way for the second half of shooting out this location. Therefore, you're eliminating the time between people having to move back and forth and turning the camera around a bunch of different times. You're really consolidating time. But that's only doable because you're able to visually communicate which way the camera will be facing and when and so forth in your overhead. So again, you're buying yourself more time by being organized and communicating your organization to your team.
So the camera blocking, and just to recap, if I got it right, is basically, because a lot of people, some of this terminology might be new for them. We're talking the framing, right? Where the framing that you want, where the camera is going to be looking, and how it's going to be moving, as well as where the talent is going to be. Oh no, that's the next one. That's the next talent blocking. But for the camera, it's where it's going to be pointing and how it's moving.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct. The third point is talent blocking, helping your talent and crew understand positioning ahead of time. Again, with the lighting plan, the camera blocking, the talent blocking, these are all kind of things you can do at once as you rough it all in on again, I use a dry erase. So if I want my actors to walk into the room and then they sit on the couch and have a powwow and then they get up and move to the table and have a falling out and one of the actors storms out. So I'm doing two overhead icons of my two talents, and I'm creating color coordinated arrows showing them going to the couch and then getting up from the couch and going to the counter, and then one leaving the counter and exiting the scene. Therefore, if I start with this, I can kind of figure out where the camera is going to be around them. I'm seeing the space from a bird's eye view, understanding where the camera is going to be, where it's going to be looking, and that essentially leads to my fourth point, my last point, which is discovering tactical shooting strategies, and that's through the planning and preparation of these things, you can find new ways to shoot and execute your scene just by creating these overheads and understanding these moments and understanding space and where your talent's going to be in the room and things like that. Whereas maybe I wanted to shoot this couple sitting on a couch and shoot them cross coverage, where I'm shooting one close-up of one of them and one close-up of the other. But because they're walking in and sitting on the couch and getting up and going to the counter, maybe based off of my overhead, I have an opportunity to not do that, and I can put the camera on a steady cam and shoot them together walking and sitting on the couch. And as the camera goes around the couch, they're getting up and moving to the counter, creating this very dynamic shot of on-screen movement and camera movement kind of contrasting each other harmoniously and moving together. That creates that's like a really excellent tip to make stronger, better filmmaking scenes, because you're not just reverting to cross coverage and more of like your basic shots. You're kind of finding opportunities to maybe combine them together. That could be for time's sake as well, or it can just be for aesthetic choice, creative choice,
right?
What have you.
Yeah, I just got done seeing behind the scenes of a piece where they had all kinds of difficulties, rain and weather and whatnot, and basically they lost like half their day, and they had to do exactly that. They had to take, instead of the 2 or 3 shots that they wanted to do for whatever scene, they had to combine it into kind of one shot, and to save setups and to save different shots all the amount of shots that they needed. They basically had to cut it down in half, and they did it just like that. Yeah.
I think it essentially acts as insurance in a way.
Right.
If anything else. If not, if you're doing it right and you're really ahead of the game with this stuff, I mean, you can take the time to come up with dynamic shots that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do if you weren't seeing it all happen from a bird's eye view. I mean, that's lighting, talent, camera, that's everyone involved. And you're able to see it and look down on the whole shooting location and understand, oh, well, I haven't looked this way, or this isn't being utilized. What if the camera went back here? I mean, it's just a better way to dissect your scene and figure out ways to make it better. If you don't have that luxury and you're really just doing it to just keep everybody on track and keep everybody in the know of what you're doing and how the blocking talent camera is planning out, you can use it in those types of situations, Aviv, that you just mentioned.
Right. To bail yourself out. Yeah, listen, this is fascinating. I mean, I'm kind of like now seeing the overarching kind of what you just did here with this presentation as breaking it up into two pieces. And I'm seeing it kind of like the first part, which is the treatment. I find that to be, in the kind, I guess in the business world, it would be called setting expectations. Right. So right. So the client knows what's going on. They know what to expect. Everybody on board knows what to expect. So there's no surprises as far as the approach. So that's key. And I think a lot of people either don't do it altogether or they really skimp out on it. And you really broke it down into a lot of layers. It's not just here's what we're doing. You really broke it down into the different aspects, the lookbook, the aesthetic, and really breaking it down into speaking about it, which I like, as opposed to just leaving it to only visual. And then the technical part, the toys, the colors. So all that is setting the expectations. Everybody's on the same page. Nobody's surprised. Everybody's happy. You get kind of like, you get the stamp of approval and it's signed off before you get going.
The importance, like what my personal importance is for doing the treatments and why I learned the importance of it over time, because I didn't start out doing treatments. I always kind of looked at treatments like a burden. I was more or less in the mindset, especially when I was younger. I'm 28 now, but in my earlier 20s, I was like, oh, I'm the visual guy. I show up and work the camera, and like that's my job. I'm not the person who's going to put together, the whole big sheet and write up on what I plan to do. Just let me show you. That was kind of my mentality going into that. And whenever a treatment or anything was requested of me, I would be hesitant to go ahead and put all of that together. And then over time, as more and more projects were showing up on my doorstep and more clout was coming to my name, and those projects were getting bigger and those contexts were getting bigger, I was like, oh shoot, now I'm in a different field and I need to be competing on a higher level. And competing as a filmmaker does not always mean you're competing behind the camera. That filmmaking isn't just about being on set, as we all know, and explaining your vision really becomes an art form just in that aspect alone. So when you're doing a treatment and you're doing overheads and things like that, you're really just becoming a master at explaining vision. It's not always just you're not just explaining your vision to the audience at the end of the day. I like to think about it like you have two audiences. Your first audience is the audience you're pitching your vision to, and you're getting them to understand and get them excited and get them in the seats and clapping at the end of it. That project there is your treatment. The second audience is the audience that's going to watch that final product in the most traditional sense, as we all know a film audience is. But that's kind of where the full arc of putting lots of work into your treatment came to be, and the importance of doing a nice job with that also came to be.
That was very powerful what you just said there, as far as having two audiences, and the first audience is before it gets viewed, and you have to basically sell them and excite them just like you want the final piece to be exciting. The barometer of whether or not you're on the right track is, are they going to be excited with the treatment? I really like the way you put that. That's key. And I want to kind of switch the flip just for a second for everybody listening, because I know a lot of people that are listening are not necessarily at the level where they're being represented and there's an agency in the middle and all this kind of stuff. They're just simply more of a small production company and working directly with clients and local, doing local work and things like that, promos and and all that kind of stuff. I guarantee that if they get the next time one of these people that are listening are get a job, get a potential client that's interested, and they tell them we're thinking to do a project, and they show up with a treatment in depth like what you have, you will land that job. They will say, wow, this guy really put something together. They know that they're in good hands, and if there's anything that you're off on, you'll know right then and there, and you'll be able to tweak it with them. So I think from a business standpoint, people really need to realize the power of utilizing this concept of a treatment on the higher level and bring it back down to even just the regular kind of client work on the smaller budget stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Very well said. I think you put together a treatment. I think you should put yourself in the client's shoes. If you're spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and you're responsible for that money, you know, what's going to make you feel more comfortable? You getting on set with a director who is just, you're kind of just going off of his word, which may be great, and that director may have tons of clout to their name and you may not have any doubts. Or a director that's coming to set, and before you guys even meet on set, you've already received in-depth analysis of what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what you're using to get it done, what the colors are going to be. I mean, it's just right. If you're in their shoes, I feel like the natural response is you're going to feel much more comfortable with that person. Yeah,
no question. So as I was saying in the beginning, I really loved the way you broke this down. I felt like the first part was like I kind of put it in other terms, which is managing expectations. Everybody kind of knows what's coming, and there's no surprises. And the second part I thought was just absolutely amazing, and that's just being properly prepared, and therefore everything goes smooth. The creating the overheads, I can't tell you how many times I've been on projects where I don't think I've seen that. I would say 90% of the time I don't see that. I mean, we're prepared. We kind of know whether we know a lot, but there isn't a piece of paper with overheads and for every scene or for every location, I should say, and that way everybody kind of can just go refer to that same page. And you don't have to babysit everybody because they all know what they can just refer to that paper and get going. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big change for everybody listening. These two monster pieces of the puzzle that you've brought to us today.
Yes, thank you, and I hope it helps. I hope people are able to maybe have a new appreciation for preparation materials.
Awesome. Well, listen, it was definitely worth the wait. For those that didn't hear us in the beginning, Alex and I have been going back and forth for several months now trying to get this presentation put together. But, he has a lot of work and he's in demand as he should be. So thank God we were able to get him on, and it was obviously very well worth it. Alex, thank you so much for coming on and bringing this all to us.
Thank you so much, Aviv. Thank you for having me on Cine Summit. Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Cool. I look forward to checking it out.
Sweet, Alex. Now, everybody, make sure to get out there and put this to use. That's always the key. If you sit down on your chair and just be, just dream about making work, that's not how it's going to get done. So get out there, put it to use, and that's how you'll grow. And we will see you at the next presentation.